Hi, I'm Mark, and on this channel I talk about UK politics and Brexit from an outside view, although I do know the UK from the inside as well. Starmer's so-called law and order response to the unrest could shape his term in office. But even if he can contain the protest, the challenge remains to unite the divided country. Keir Starmer actually wanted to go on holiday. The election campaign, which ended with a clear victory for his Labour Party, was exhausting. So were his first appointments as British Prime Minister. The traditional opening of the new parliamentary season with the King's Speech, the first meetings with other heads of state, and participation in the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Paris, which were really nice, by the way. But Starmer had to postpone his holiday and instead free his country from the state of emergency. The Prime Minister is facing unrest, the likes of which the country has not seen for more than 10 years, and the British are still finding it difficult to understand the events of the past few days. On July 29th, a young man in Southport stabbed 3 girls and injured several children. The false report that the perpetrator was a Muslim migrant was spread on various platforms, and in fact, a 17-year-old who was born in Great Britain is in custody. His parents are from Rwanda, though. This act and the false reports mobilized right-wing extremists across the United Kingdom. They attacked police officers, set fire to asylum seekers' accommodation, and attacked people with a migrant background. Cars and buildings were set on fire, and media reported more than 400 arrests. Prime Minister Starmer announced that the rioters would face the full force of the law, and the first prison sentences have already been imposed. However, the unrest shows that the clear election victory of his Labour Party has covered up deep divisions, and that the real challenge for Starmer will only come after the protests have been dealt with. The riots released a frustration that has been building up for years and decades. And some have described the first few weeks between the British and their new Prime Minister as a honeymoon, and the Labour politician's poll ratings soared after he took office. He offered the British a serious contrast to Tory predecessors such as Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and a spirit of optimism seemed to be spreading in the country after years of Conservative chaos. Starmer took over the Labour leadership 4.5 years ago. He moved the party, which had drifted far to the left during its 14-year period in opposition, back to the centre and led it to a clear victory over the Tories. But his overwhelming election victory is largely due to voters' dissatisfaction with the Tories. Starmer has yet to convince the British of his leadership qualities, and now, in the midst of the crisis, is facing his first major test. Instead of recovering from the election campaign on holiday, as I said, Starmer initiated 3 meetings of the National Crisis Team Cobra to discuss the situation with cabinet members and representatives of the security forces. Well, Starmer is no stranger to the new role. The Labour politician has experience in dealing with unrest. He headed the Royal Public Prosecutor's Office when there were days of street battles in 2011, first in London, then in Birmingham, Liverpool and Manchester. The trigger was the death of Mark Duggan, a black man who was shot during a police check. The Labour leader ensured that the courts remained open 24 hours a day to try criminals and allowed judges to impose longer and harsher sentences. Starmer therefore knows the levers of power available and the people who use them. This time, the protests are coming from the right. However, the Prime Minister stresses that the motivation of the rioters does not matter. This is violence, not protest, he said, and the violent mob, as he called them, does not represent the country. Starmer wants to present himself as a law and order man. He promises that the perpetrators will be quickly sentenced to prison terms of several years, and that is what is happening. The first rioters arrested were sentenced to prison terms of up to 3 years on the first Wednesday, and Starmer also announced that the government had hired 70 additional prosecutors, expanded a system of mutual aid between police forces, and introduced new emergency security measures for mosques. All of these measures correspond to Starmer's public image. He's seen as a factual politician, a calm thinker, and an organized decision maker. That's why his people call him no drama Starmer. But Starmer has also taken a risk with his tough policy. The prisons in Great Britain are overcrowded. In July, the new government announced that it would release thousands of prisoners early to make room. The Prison Governors Union is now warning that an influx of prisoners would paralyze and destabilize the prison system. But the Prime Minister is counting on the harsh punishments to deter the rioters. At the same time, he's increasing police presence. The police prepared for riots in more than 100 locations last Wednesday, but then images of the first convictions of the street thugs were circulated in the media, and the announced big day, as everybody expected, never happened. Instead, thousands of people gathered for peaceful protests against the right-wing extremist riots in cities such as London, Sheffield, Bristol and Brighton. But no one knows whether the worst is over. The outbreaks of violence have shown how fragile British society is and how easily online media can be used for intellectual arson. The British head of government even clashed personally with Elon Musk, the owner of the communications platform X. Musk accused Starmer of applying double standards and using the police unilaterally to protect ethnic minorities. The Prime Minister sharply criticized the accusations and warned platform providers that, in view of the outbreak of violence, crimes were taking place in what he said, in your rooms. His team said that social media companies had a responsibility not to spread disinformation. The British authorities announced that they would prosecute so-called keyboard warriors if they called for violence. The fact that the unrest in Britain was able to spread so quickly is not only due to misinformation on social media. In particular, the social hotspots in the formerly industrial north of England have long been suffering from the sharp rise in the cost of living. Many people in cities like Middlesbrough in the east or Liverpool in the west feel economically left behind by the rich south and forgotten by the government in London. The standard of living of the average Briton is still lower than at the time of the previous election in 2019. That's a consequence of inflation, which has been higher than wage increases for almost 2 years. The poverty rate after deducting housing costs has risen to around 20%, and many people are homeless. And the result is a deep-seated frustration that reaches into the middle of society. And another level is exacerbating social conflicts as well, the ongoing political dispute over how to deal with illegal migrants. Anti-immigration sentiment was one of the main reasons for the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union in 2016. The success of Nigel Farage's Reform UK party recently showed how dissatisfied many Britons still are. The former Brexit promoter won 4 million votes in the parliamentary elections on July 4th, among other things with the demand that only as many immigrants should be allowed into the country as left the country in the same year. And Starmer's conservative predecessors tried to deport illegal migrants to the East African country of Rwanda with the so-called Rwanda Plan. The usefulness of this idea was doubted by many, and it ultimately failed. The new Prime Minister, on the other hand, wants to take more action against the traffickers or people smuggling gangs. But criticism is already being voiced on both sides of the political spectrum. On the right is the nationalist Farage, who criticizes the Prime Minister's what he calls hesitant reaction to the unrest, and on the left, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and his allies are attacking the government, accusing it of contributing to the anti-migrant and anti-Muslim sentiment. Starmer's reaction to the riots could be a decisive moment in his term in office. But one thing is clear: quick verdicts against stone throwers will not be enough if the Prime Minister does not succeed in overcoming the deep divisions in the country. The next riots will only be a matter of time. And if you want to know more, The next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.